thank God it's over. That was the first thing that I thought.
Joseph Cardinal Bernardine sounding tonight like a man whose prayers have been answered, and they have been. The Cardinal says that when word came today from Cincinnati that accuser Stephen Cook was no longer standing by his story, he prayed privately for 30 minutes, a prayer of gratitude. Then he met the media and for the first time showed some of the frustration he's been keeping inside since the lawsuit was filed in November.
The travesty was that I, a man of 65 years, who has been a priest for 42 years and a bishop for 28 years, was publicly humiliated before the world. An innocent man. That's a travesty.
The 34-year-old Cook had claimed that therapy and hypnosis had helped him recall buried memories of abuse by Cardinal Bernardine when Bernardine was the Archbishop of Cincinnati in the mid-1970s. The Cardinal's response last fall was to firmly call the allegations false, but extend a public hand of friendship to Cook, offering to meet and pray with him. Today, he used the same gentle tones toward his accuser.
Stephen Cook, I harbor no ill feelings toward Stephen Cook. I have compassion for him. I have prayed for him every day, and I will continue to do so.
The Cardinal said tonight that he never lost faith he'd prevail, and he even sees some good coming from his ordeal. What good, if anything, came out of Stephen Cook's allegations and the trials you've had in the last 3.5 months?
Well, first of all, it's made a powerful impact on me spiritually. I think that I have really grown in intimacy with the Lord. I don't think that my spiritual life will ever be the same again.
It's the hottest handoff in the fast food industry.
One frosty, one hot tea, and one hot cocoa.
But some fast food customers have paid a price they never could have imagined for a simple cup of coffee.
When it hit in my lap, it opened up between my legs and burned both inner thighs.
Donna Dargatz ordered 6 coffees at this Wakanda drive-thru, and they spilled into her lap. She was in great pain, but she managed to rush home and get into a cold bath.
As I sat there, it just started developing the blisters, and I could not, the pain was so intense you could not even describe it.
Dargatz is now suing McDonald's, as did Laura Amaya, who was burned at this Southside McDonald's when a cup of coffee fell into her lap while she sat in the restaurant. A jury found the accident was her fault, but awarded her $63,000, just because the coffee was unreasonably hot. She won't talk about her injuries. It's too painful to relive the accident.
The pain that she suffered was so intense that she actually, when this happened, pulled her pants down in a crowded McDonald's restaurant. And her companion had to carry her out of the restaurant and take her over to a hospital.
Nobody knows the temperature of the coffee that was served to Laura Amaya, but the manager testified it was brewed at 195 degrees. That's about the same temperature of the tea that we found being served at this Wendy's in Forest Park. At 194.6 degrees, it was the hottest drink we found after visiting nearly 50 fast food outlets and checking the temperatures of the coffee, tea, and hot chocolate being served. We used a digital kitchen thermometer to get our readings. Dunkin' Donuts averaged the hottest coffee at around 175 degrees. McDonald's, Burger King, and Wendy's all came in a little lower. At 180 degrees, a hot liquid can cause an immediate second-degree burn. In 2 to 7 seconds, a third-degree burn. Most of the time, when you get a cup of coffee for the road, it seems too hot to drink right away anyway. So the question is, why do they make it so hot?
God forbid you have cold coffee or warm coffee. You really hear about it.
Jerry Franey manages a Dunkin' Donuts in the Loop. He says high brewing temperatures, he uses 196 degrees, get the most flavor out of the beans. His coffee is served around 175 degrees because customers want it that way.
They demand hot coffee.
And our survey found that the coffee usually is hot, although not exceptionally hot in the 180 or 190 degree range. What alarmed us, though, was our findings concerning hot chocolate, a drink that is largely served to children. Hot chocolate, and in fact hot tea, were consistently hotter than the coffee. 4 of the 6 McDonald's where we tested tea were above 180 degrees. 187 at the McDonald's on 26th Street, where Laura Amaya was burned. At this Wendy's on Harlem near Madison, hot chocolate measured 181 degrees, 186 degrees at that Wendy's in Forest Park.
I believe it's irresponsible.
Chicago plastic surgeon David Teplica sees the devastating damage done by scald burns every day.
It just breaks my heart to think about 180 degrees in the hands of a small child in a moving automobile. You're begging for trouble.
Do children get burned by fast food's hot chocolate? These confidential McDonald's records, introduced as evidence at Stella Liebeck's trial, list some 700 burn claims against the company. Included on the list, hot chocolate burns, a burned groin, burned forearm, burned legs, burned stomach, burned chest. Wendy's hot chocolate is hotter than McDonald's and hotter than its own coffee because of the way it's made. Other fast food chains use hot chocolate machines, normally producing a temperature of 160 or so. Burger King's manual calls for 155 degrees. But Wendy's has been using a powder mix with water from a side spout on its coffee machine. That's the same water that's heated to 195 degrees to brew coffee. When it goes through the coffee grounds and into the pot, it cools to around 180. But if it comes directly out that side spout for hot chocolate or tea, it hasn't cooled off. It's at 195.
Effective today, we are removing hot chocolate for the time being in all Wendy's across the United States.
A Wendy's spokesman this morning announcing the company's reaction to our investigation. We informed them of our findings last week. After a series of top-level meetings, the decision by the company president immediately stopped selling hot chocolate in all of their 4,000 restaurants.
The fact that hot chocolate is likely served to younger people makes the temperature a more serious issue.
Do you remember buying a car a week ago?
Do I remember buying a car? No, I didn't buy the car.
8 days after buying a brand new Buick Skylark from Grossinger Motors in Lincolnwood, 83-year-old Sarah Kaplan remembers virtually nothing about her purchase. In fact, just minutes after I interviewed her for this story, Mrs. Kaplan couldn't remember what I was doing in her apartment. Can you tell me what we talked about 10 minutes ago?
No, not really.
What would allow her to walk in, buy a car, and not remember it 2 or 3 days later?
Part of it's part of the natural aging process. Her primary physician feels she has a beginning of Alzheimer's.
When Mrs. Kaplan started making occasional references to a new car last week, her family tracked it down and faxed this letter to Grossinger's, saying her driver's license has been revoked, she has no automobile insurance, and she is no longer competent to be driving an automobile. Mrs. Kaplan had made a $3,000 down payment. Her family returned the car to Grossinger's, asked Grossinger's to cancel the whole deal, and return the $3,000, or at least half of it. Grossinger's said no.
He spoke to someone who basically said, "We don't take cars back. Too bad, it's your problem."
Late this afternoon, we went with Mrs. Kaplan to Grossinger's to look at her new car. She remembered it as a beige car. The dealer helped us find it. It was blue. Grossinger's declined to answer our questions on camera, but off camera, a company spokesman said that as long as a customer appears to be competent at the time of the sale, the company will always stick by its policy that a sale is a sale is a sale. Marty Tornatore of Grossinger's says Mrs. Kaplan showed no signs of any incapacitation when purchasing the car. He says the company wouldn't lose a lot of money if it took the car back now, but a lot of paperwork goes into a car sale, and if the car were put back on the lot now, it would have to be labeled as a demo or as used and sold for less than new. He also says he's got 27 or 30 such cars on the lot and doesn't need this one back. None of these answers satisfies the Kaplans.
I think that they have a responsibility. It's an automobile. They're not, selling a chicken. I think they really have a responsibility that no one's endangered, that who they're selling it to can operate a vehicle.
Jarrell, do you remember this door coming down and hitting you?
4-year-old Jarrell Simmons shakes his head and says no, he doesn't remember what happened 2 years ago, but his mother will never forget.
From where I was, I just saw the lid coming down, so I just started running and screaming.
I turned away, and I heard the snap, and I turned back, and his feet were, his feet was about this far up. And the problem was his feet wasn't kicking.
And Jarrell didn't start kicking or moving at all until his father lifted up the minivan's rear gate that had come crashing down and pinned him on his chest as he climbed into the van. One of the two supporting liftgate struts had failed, just like the strut that failed on Roman Gallus's 92 Dodge Caravan.
This hatch, I'm going to say, is probably an 80-pound wall coming down on anybody.
Just like the strut that failed on Jamie Toomey's 92 Dodge Caravan.
I think I just pulled out one piece of luggage, set it down to get another one, and that's when something must have snapped and fell.
Just like the strut that failed on Becky Henkel's 92 Plymouth Grand Voyager.
Upsetting. I thought it was real dangerous.
We've learned that these 4 minivan owners are among almost 600 owners who have complained to Chrysler about broken liftgate struts. There have been over 170 complaints since last August alone. That's an average of 1 per day. The complaints primarily involve 91 through 93 Dodge Caravans and Grand Caravans, Plymouth Voyagers and Grand Voyagers, and Chrysler Town and Country minivans. Some of the most popular minivans on the road, over 1 million sold by Chrysler for those 3 years. There are 2 ways in which these hatch struts can fail. Sometimes the gas inside this black cylinder just leaks out over time, causing a gradual loss of pressure, and the owner will be aware of that. But sometimes the bolt that connects the rod to the van itself can just snap off without any warning at all.
I don't allow myself to think what could have happened because that terrifies me.
Jarrell Simmons was rushed to a hospital. Doctors said he had the wind knocked out of him and suffered some bruises. Chrysler is aware of at least 40 injuries caused by strut failures. In Oregon and Connecticut, adults were knocked out. In Rhode Island, the liftgate fell on an infant's head. A Mississippi man suffered a minor concussion, requiring 4 staples in his scalp.
From what I know, the injuries thus far have been very, very minor and usually soft tissue injuries, a bump on the arm, a bump on the head.
Only soft tissue injury. I wouldn't want to hear him tell me that because that is a person waiting for a tragedy.
Chrysler executives say they're not waiting for a tragedy. In recent months, under pressure from federal safety officials, they've conducted engineering tests to find out why the struts fail. They just haven't pinpointed the cause.
3 factors really are driving this. At the supplier, the very high pressure gas was put in, perhaps a little higher than necessary on some. The torque placed on the bolt when putting it in may have been a little too strong, or overuse or very, very heavy use of the liftgate.
Chrysler also says there's been no recall because the falling liftgates are unlikely to cause any serious injuries. The automaker says the bolts often snap off when the liftgate is closed or when it's being held open and at least one strut is still functioning.
I've never heard of any case where 2 bolts snapped at once. So we have heard cases where one side of it sagged.
But the minivan owners who have seen it themselves disagree. They say those liftgates don't sag at all. They come down hard and fast. So we conducted our own test with this 93 Dodge Caravan and some rolls of paper towels. Some child safety experts say a roll of paper towels resembles the density of a youngster's chest. With both struts working, the falling liftgate bends the cardboard tube inside the roll, but doesn't crush it. Then we removed one of the struts to duplicate a bolt breaking off. This time, the tube is sealed shut. We ran a similar test with a block of clay. The liftgate ended up embedded in the clay.
Look at this. Look at that, how deformed it was.
Dr. John Sarwark is head of the Center for Childhood Safety at Children's Memorial Hospital. He says that falling liftgate could cause a crippling injury.
Could cause a neurological injury to the spine, or could possibly cause a soft tissue injury to the structures of the neck, which might include the trachea or breathing tube, or worse.
These people say bolts snapped, they weren't holding onto it, and it just came down with a great deal of force.
Well, maybe they should tell us that in such details as they have.
I have the letters. Okay. Letters like these from Chrysler's own files dating back to 1994. Letters received by Chrysler's owner relations department. Letters received by the chairman of the board. Many of them warning of the potential for severe injuries. Jamie Toomey called Chrysler's hotline last September. By that time, Chrysler had already received over 400 liftgate strut complaints.
I said, you know, that could have killed someone. And they said, well, we haven't had any reports on that. I said, well, even if you don't have a report on that, how many people is it going to take before somebody actually gets killed before you decide to do a recall on the part?
Gerald Simmons agrees, saying that the close call with little Jarrell 2 years ago should have been warning enough.
Okay, we got some soft tissue injury. Let's handle it right now. you know, before somebody gets seriously hurt. That's how you care about people.
Larry Yellen, Fox News, Chicago.